Hi everyone, my name is Christina Kostelecki from PASA Sustainable Agriculture, and I am glad that you all were able to join us today. You are joining us for our COVID-19 Fresh Food Financing Initiative, which is a new grant put out by PDA, and I'll let PDA talk a little bit about that. But first, a few housekeeping things. Everyone is muted just to avoid background noise. This will be recorded and the recordings will be available at pasafarming.org/resources. And then we've got a lot of COVID-19 specific resources at pasafarming.org/COVID. So you can access any of those at any point. So all of the links that are in these slides, you'll be able to access with that recording when we send that out. As you have questions, feel free to ask them throughout the webinar using the Q&A chat or Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. We are going to hold all questions until the end of the webinar, just so that we can make sure we get through all of the slides that we've got, but we will make sure that we answer as many questions as we have time for. So first, a little bit about PASA. We're hosting this webinar today, so you might know about us. We're a Pennsylvania-based association of farmers, food system professionals, and sustainable agriculture supporters, and we're working to build a more economically just, environmentally regenerative, and community-focused food system. So if you want to get involved in that, you can sign up for our e-news, you can become a member, you can attend any of our events. Right now, all of our events are virtual due to COVID. Also today, our hosts are from the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture. They're committed to sustainable and safe supply of food and agriculture products in the Commonwealth from farm to table, and being good stewards of the land and Pennsylvania's natural resources. The PDA promotes the viability of farms, protects consumers, and safeguards the health of people, planet, animals, and the environment. More specifically, I am Christina Kostelecki, the Operations Director here at PASA. We're also going to be joined by Cheryl Cook, the Deputy Secretary of Agriculture at PDA, and Mike Roth, the William Penn Fellow at PDA. And today, the things that we're going to specifically cover, the background on this funding, the qualifications, and then in the nitty-gritty about how to apply. And again, like I said at the end, we'll definitely leave some time for questions. So now I want to turn it over to Cheryl Cook, the Deputy Secretary of Agriculture at PDA, so that she can give us a little bit of background information here.
Thank you so much, Christine. It's my pleasure to join you. I hope everyone can hear me all right.
Yeah.
It's my pleasure to talk about the Fresh Food Financing Initiative, a $10 million commitment in funding that the state received through the Federal CARES Act, which will be leveraged with the unique fundraising talents of a group of community development financing institutions, or CDFIs, which in some cases have been working on increasing access to food in food deserts for over a decade. The original iteration of this program started in Pennsylvania and was so successful it was adopted at the federal level as the Healthy Food Financing Initiative, made part of the 2014 and 2018 Farm Bills. Under the federal version, for example, USDA's Rural Development Mission Area is able to finance local food-related businesses with loan guarantee and even some grant funds that normally only are available in communities of fewer than 50,000 people. It's the only place where rural development gets to do some urban development to build local foods. This new version of the FFFI is again specific to Pennsylvania, even though it's starting with federal funds. But instead of being limited to just putting grocery stores in food deserts, though, this time around, a wider swath of food retailers are available, and food deserts are one of several priorities that also speak directly to the populations who've been most at risk for COVID-19, both because they often are those essential workers everybody's finally noticed, and because they're more likely to have the kinds of pre-existing economic, environmental, and health conditions that make someone more vulnerable. Health conditions like type 2 diabetes, hypertension, obesity, and a variety of other chronic conditions that often tied directly to Americans' generally poor diets that are made all the worse when fresh food just isn't available. I talk a lot about food security and it being a four-legged stool. The first leg is whether food is available at any price. And I know many of you were as shocked as I was to walk in the grocery stores back in late March and early April and realize that shelves were empty. Imagine a world where that's typically the case. The second leg is whether food is affordable. And it's important to note here that the same legislation reigniting the Fresh Food Financing Initiative also put an extra $10 million in the Pennsylvania Agricultural Surplus System Program, or the PASS program, on top of the 1.5 million annual appropriation. So maybe we could do another webinar on that someday. The third leg is whether food is safe, which in Pennsylvania is a shared duty between local health departments that have kept that responsibility for the restaurants in their area and the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture everywhere else. The final leg is whether the food is nutritious. And we've been stunningly bad at asking this question in the context of federal farm bills. It's where corporate responsibility and personal responsibility meet. Will eating this move me and my kids closer to health or farther away? Corporate responsibility tends to be driven more by consumer demand than government mandate these days. Consumer demand tends to be driven more by convenience than by our shared learning about better health. But I think COVID-19 creates an opportunity, especially for folks like PASA members who've been right on this part of food security for a long time and have been working with the healthcare community on food-based social determinants of health and those who could be taking advantage of the Fresh Food Financing Initiative. Yes, it can help offset PPE costs. It can also help offset costs of things like additional refrigeration so more fresh food can be made available. Thanks for inviting me to join you. I'm going to turn it over to our very talented Mike Roth from here. Mike is part of our policy shop, and he's been given the point for managing this new Fresh Food Financing Initiative program.
Thanks, Cheryl. I appreciate that. So welcome, everyone, and glad you could attend this webinar today. Just to give you the quick overview, the FFFI program, the goal of it is to be a relief fund to provide grant support to food retailing businesses. I apologize for the sirens in the background here. Okay. Retailing businesses impacted by COVID-19 to ensure that amidst the pandemic, communities can maintain healthy food access. In recognition of the disproportionate impacts of both COVID-19 and food apartheid on communities made up of Black, Indigenous, and people of color, or BIPOC, and especially Black and African American communities, prioritization will be given to those businesses that are owned by and serve low-income BIPOC communities. So that's just the general overview. The slide we have here is our main landing page. We have some of the main topics that we have posted. If you're looking for the more in-depth view of this program, you can see here on the bottom right, we have the Fresh Food Financing Initiative. That link will show you basically the general overview of everything, and also the link to DCD's website where you would apply for the grant. Next slide, please. Thanks. So these are some of the acronyms that we have throughout both the application and also the general overview of the program. Certainly would recommend taking a look at these, getting more familiar with them, just so it makes sense throughout the application process. Next slide, please. Okay, so what are the goals of this and objectives of FFFI? So we want to support food retailing businesses impacted by COVID-19. We want to ensure that low-income and underserved communities are able to get food access, both now during the shock of COVID-19, but also during the normal stresses that Commonwealth faces in relation to food access. We want to contribute to better health outcomes by providing access to fresh food, as Cheryl was mentioning. We want to stimulate investments in the business that are BIPOC owned and that serve lower income BIPOC communities. We want to remove financing and operating barriers that healthy food retailers face in lower income communities. And we want to strengthen local food systems to increase market opportunities for PA farmers. Support in the creation and preservation of jobs, and we want to create and retain a qualified workforce. Next slide, please. Okay, so we have three main categories that you might be applying for, depending on your eligibility. So the first is your neighborhood markets and food enterprises. That's things such as farm market vendors, on-farm market stands, urban farms, community gardens, or I'm sorry, that's a subsection under there that is limited to 15,000. The neighborhood market would be more like a corner store. That would also include folks that run farmers markets. So if you are running a large farmers market, you would be eligible for the 100,000. An individual vendor at your market would be eligible for the 15,000. We also have the full service traditional grocery stores. So that might be, one or two grocery stores that are in an area that have a smaller footprint than, some of the more traditional grocery stores. They would be eligible up to $500,000. And then finally, the larger retail stores that are perhaps across the Commonwealth are able to apply for $1 million. That being said, if you do have multiple locations and you are applying for multiple locations, you just need one application, and all the locations that you're planning to spend the money on should meet the eligibility requirements of the grant. So you can't apply for one location that is in a low-income area or low-access area and then apply the funds to a store that's not in one of those areas. Next slide, please. So who are we opening this up to? This is a pretty wide-reaching audience that we want to get these funds out to. So this includes everything from community gardens that do retail sales on site, all the way to food processing centers. We've talked quite a bit lately about the challenges that meat processors are facing. They would certainly be eligible as long as they're providing food to retail sale. We think about just neighborhood corner stores that are providing fresh food. All of those would apply. We have a number of mobile markets throughout the state that are operating out of buses and vans and are providing fresh fruit and vegetables for purchase to low-income communities and others. So all of these would apply. The one caveat, and the one we do receive quite a bit of questions on, is the charitable food system. And unfortunately for this specific grant program, that is not eligible. It has to be a retail facility. So looking at eligibility, 50% of the sales should be directly to consumers and relate to fresh food and staple foods. So think about things like meat, fruits and vegetables, grains. So you can sort of think of it as whole foods, but then also things like some dairy products that are perishable and other items like that. They need to operate and provide service in PA. They need to have operated before March 2020, and they need to serve customers in low to moderate income areas. Also, certainly low access areas would be a bonus. They need to provide affordable, high quality food, and they should either accept or show plans to accept SNAP or WIC. So those that aren't eligible, as I mentioned before, are food pantries and emergency feeding operations that aren't charging a price for the items that they're giving away. Ag-related projects with no direct consumer component, and also restaurants, cafes, and prepared food businesses are not eligible. Next slide, please. So another big question that comes up is, what can I actually put this money towards? So we're actually having people, you're able to submit your receipts for any items that you purchase from March 1st all the way until November 30th. So if you've already purchased some things to deal with COVID, that'll be covered. If you're thinking about things in the future for COVID, that also will be covered. So we're thinking about, extra cleaning supplies, cleaning requirements, any sort of outside contracting that you're required to manage social distancing, extra cleaning, making sure you don't have too many people in your facility. We're also thinking about infrastructure improvements, new construction, and adaptive reuse related to COVID-19. Equipment purchases, so I did mention before, like meat processors, a lot of them have been struggling with the refrigeration capacity that they have. That would be something that would be covered in this to increase the availability of fresh food. but also think about more traditional COVID-19 interventions like plexiglass separators. Also issues around inventory, higher cost of goods, delivery costs, loss of product, things like that would be covered as long as you have records of that. And then also technology or delivery of food, if you've had to pay for new computer systems or anything like that, any sort of infrastructure related type things, we would cover that. We just wouldn't cover, if you have to pay a monthly cost for your subscription or something, we would not pay for that, but we would pay for any of the technology, the physical technology or purchasing of a website, that sort of thing. Also, especially EBT readers as well. And then also just in general, we've noticed quite a few people have seen, increased demand for certain products. They've had to expand, access to those by, it could be something as simple as refrigeration, but also maybe expanding their store a bit, and that would be something we cover as well. So again, there are things that aren't eligible for this. The first one is hazard pay. However, if you are interested in hazard pay, I highly recommend that you take a look at DCD's website. They came out with a new hazard pay grant program. This also would not cover employee wages or employee time related to COVID-19. So those are sort of the main things for eligibility. We're looking for, top priority would go to projects that are located and owned by POC communities. That's either 50% of the population or more is BIPOC, or at least having 700 people that are BIPOC in that community. Looking to assist minority, women's service, service disabled veterans, LGBTQ plus community, and those with disabilities who own these enterprises. We also want to address the issues of food apartheid. So any entity within a food desert certainly would be a top priority for us. We also, it's certainly a bonus if you're sourcing your products from local farmers or just in general PA products. So we're thinking about fresh fruits, vegetables, milk and dairy products, and meat products. So the most important number is August 14th. So that is the closing of the application. This is a competitive grant, so there's no rush to be the first in line, but it is important that you get your information in before August 14th. So that is the deadline, and we look forward to seeing your applications. And with that, I'll pass it over to Christina.
Thanks, Mike. So if you're still with us, that probably means that you met those eligibility requirements or know of someone who does and want to help them apply. So we're gonna kind of go through step-by-step how to apply for this. And again, all of these slides will be available when we send out the recording on our website afterward. So if you feel like I'm going a little bit too fast through any of this, please know that you'll be able to take some time afterward to look through it. So, and Mike is also going to jump in here and provide some context as I get to any specific slides. But of course, please feel free to ask questions as we go, and we'll answer those questions at the end. So the first step is to get to a Keystone Login if you don't already have one. And you can see the website there is esa.dced.state.pa.us. And when you get there, you can register. When you go to register, you'll need to include your name, date of birth, email or phone number, a username, a password, and some security questions. So after you've gotten a login here, you'll return back to this page and log in on the right-hand side there. So once you're logged in, your screen looks something like this. The first step is to name your project. This is the name that you create. So it can be, for example, the name of your store or business. And then you'll click Create a New Application. That'll take you to a screen that looks kind of like this. And I know that this is really small, but the general idea here is that you need to check the box next to the Department of Agriculture and then scroll all the way down and click on Search. And when you do, a whole list of the grant funding available from Department of Ag will show up, and you'll just need to scroll to the bottom and look for that COVID-19 Fresh Food Financing Initiative. And you click on the Apply pencil icon right next to it. So now you're in the actual application and ready to start going through that. It looks a little bit intimidating. That screenshot on the left there are a whole bunch of fields, but really it's stuff that you already know. These aren't questions that are especially difficult. So the entity type, if you're a nonprofit, an LLC, a partnership, a sole proprietorship, your name, the NAICS code is a drop-down menu, so it's not like you have to know this. As soon as you get in there, it'll become really apparent which code you should be choosing, or mostly apparent. The next one, if you do not have a federal EIN, then you'll use your social security number. So if you don't know what a federal EIN is, use your social security number. The CEO and CEO title, a contact name, a title, a phone number, a mailing address. Continuing on, one of the next things that you'll do is talk about the project site locations. So you'll simply put in the address. This is the address of our Harrisburg PASA office. And when you do that, the PA House and Senate representatives will automatically appear. The only additional thing that you need to put on here, except for the address, is the designated areas. So if you're in an Act 47 distressed community, for example, you could check that box there. You'll also be entering your enterprise type, whether you're an agri-processor, producer, retail, food processing, and again, that project location address. The next part of the application, there are some required fields in here. So each of these are 1,000 character limit. So what do you plan to accomplish with this project? How do you plan to accomplish it? How do you plan to use these funds? And the projected schedule and key milestones and dates. The next part of the application is the actual budget. So there's just one category. You'll see here it shows cost category, and your only category is requested amount. So for example, if you're requesting $15,000, you'll enter $15,000 and then click on the tab that says basis of cost. When you do that, this budget justification is already highlighted, is already checked, and then you'll be able to add the budget narrative to talk about how you're going to use this money very specifically. That's a 2,000 character limit. Next question, these are sort of the addenda, these are extra questions. So this is an 8,000 character limit. Describe how your project will fulfill the objectives of this program. So Mike touched on this, and I'll just reshare that screen there. The objectives are supporting food retailing businesses, creating and retaining a qualified workforce. All of these things are what you want to address in those 8,000 characters. The next question is select and describe how the applicant meets the criteria for prioritization. So again, I'll share that slide that Mike covered a little bit earlier. They're prioritizing BIPOC communities, any sort of typically disadvantaged owned business enterprise. There's a link here for the food desert. There's actually a definition of, and you can look up your address, the address of your location to see if it's in a qualified food desert, and whether you source and sell PA products. So you've got 8,000 characters to kind of talk about how you meet any of these priority areas. The next question is describe how you will use the funds. And again, that's an 8,000 character limit. Then you're selecting your category. Those are whether you're a large supermarket, a full service traditional grocery store, a neighborhood market, or food enterprise. So which of those three do you fall under? And then it's asking some questions about how many current employees, both full-time and part-time, do you have, and how many expected employees as a result of this funding. Same question on the existing and additional square footage. So are you planning to expand your square footage, what's your existing, and then the expected square footage? Do you accept SNAP or WIC? And the answers to that can be yes SNAP, yes WIC, yes both, no to either of them. And then the last thing that you kind of have to do is this big giant link here, which takes you to a PDF for an FFATA, the Federal Funding Accountability and Transparency Act form. And it's a PDF that's just about a page long and really is contains most of the same information that you've already filled out on the main application. So there's not a whole lot of additional required fields on there that you would be surprised by. Sort of the last question on there is the electronic contracting procedure. The reason that I'm showing this here is that you'll need the name, title, and email address of 2 authorized individuals who, if you're awarded the contract, are going to be executing it. And one of them must be the president or the chief or the board of directors. And then the final thing to remember on here is that each of those email addresses has to be registered with that Keystone Login that I showed at the beginning before you can get the actual award. So you don't have to do it right at this minute, but I'm kind of reminding you that it might be a good idea if one of the 2 people who completes this application is one of the 2 people on this form, so that you only have to go back and add a Keystone Login for 1 more person, just as a suggestion. So again, that deadline to apply is August 14th. And we've got Mike's email address on here, michroth@pa.gov. And he is available to answer questions. But we've also got some questions right now about this. Again, I know I went through this really quickly, but that application, you can see, is not a huge time burden in terms of completing those questions. The main things that you want to think through are those big open-ended questions about how you're going to use the funds, how you meet the priority and the objectives of the grant. So I'm going to open it up to a couple of questions that we've got on here. It looks like Mike was able to answer some of them. So I'll go ahead and read it out just for the folks who, for example, were calling in or cannot see the Q&A, but feel free to continue chatting in questions. So one of the questions is, if vendors at a farm market have expenses that aren't related to the market, can they still apply under the farmer's market application, or should they fill out a separate application? So Mike said, as long as it's supporting the farmer's market operations, that would be okay. And if you're still unsure about that, you can email Mike. Mike, did you want to add anything else to that particular? Okay. The other question, Altogether Now PA, which PASA is also working with, is a nonprofit, and they're interested in working directly with grain farmers. So this might be a past program, or it might be FFFI. So they're not sure, and they wanted to get some assistance and know how it might work. So Mike said, yep, send me an email and we'll talk through it and see which one makes the most sense. And it looks like the past program might be the best for that. The next question is, we set up online shopping at our farmers market for our local produce vendor. Can the cost of the contractor who set this up for us be recuperated under this program? Mike, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, sure thing. So I certainly think that would be eligible. Unfortunately, my Skype just is restarting. But yeah, certainly any contracting that's related to the infrastructure, the facility, specifically to COVID-19 would be eligible.
Thank you. That's really helpful. The next question that came up was, for the entity type on the application, cooperative businesses is not an option. None of the choices would accurately describe our business type. What should we put in that space?
Yeah, sure thing. So you can put whatever secondary thing you think would be the closest, and then you can just let us know in the narrative, that you are a cooperative entity. I do apologize for that. I'll reach out to our folks at DCD to see if that's something we can have updated. But in the short term, if you just want to make that clear in the narrative sections, that would be great.
Thank you. The next question, must you have SNAP and/or WIC to be available for the grant?
You don't have to have SNAP or WIC when you apply or even when you receive the funds. We just would like to see that either you already do have them or that you would be open to utilizing those programs as well. But it's not a total disqualifier if you don't. We just would hopefully like to see you pursuing that if that's relevant for where you're located.
Thank you. The farm is located in a separate county where we attend a farmer's market, where some customers pay with SNAP. So how do we indicate that when it asks where we're located, if we're located in a food desert?
Yeah, so you can certainly provide us with both locations, but just note that the farmers market is in this location and accepts SNAP. That's totally fine. You're certainly eligible. It's more so just that where you're doing the retail is what we're probably most concerned with when it comes to eligibility. So that certainly would be eligible.
Thank you. The next one, since we're a farmer's market with 25+ individual vendors and therefore businesses, what percentage of the vendors would be required to accept SNAP and WIC?
Yeah, so if you're the market manager and you oversee the entire market, as long as you have, we're really not looking for a hard percentage. I mean, ideally we want to see quite a bit, but even if you just have a few, that's totally fine. Just please note that in your narrative. But yeah, if you're overseeing the market, then that's not something you need to worry about. Just in your narrative, explain that there is, a few vendors that do accept it, but that's not a hard no or anything like that for your eligibility.
Thank you. And the next question is, are there any specific square footage requirements for brick and mortar businesses to qualify in the different tiers of funding?
Yeah, so square footage relates to the second two categories, so the 500,000 and the $1 million caps. And I apologize, I don't have it right here in front of me, but I believe the 500,000 is a 30,000 square feet and the million is 100,000 square feet, but I can certainly double check that as soon as my computer comes back on here.
Sure thing. So the next question is, we're basically a full volunteer group, but they're great people and want to do more. So the, let's see, sorry here. Our goal is to really focus on the market in PA and help the PAD Ag move more product with support from consumers and investors. And the PASS program would be perfect since they've been giving away boxes for people buying the boxes right now. So this is, again, the PASS program. And like Cheryl suggested, maybe we should do a webinar on that. And that is the Pennsylvania Agriculture Surplus something. And that is a program that helps buy fresh products from farms that would have otherwise gone to waste to donate to
into the charitable food system.
Thank you, into the charitable food system. So that covers things like the harvesting and the delivery and things like that. So yeah, Cheryl, thanks for that suggestion. We should definitely.
And with the extra 10 million, we can even start to pay for the food.
That's great. I'm just typing up some responses here. Okay, so once I have an approved reimbursement and send it in, how soon will I receive payment?
Yeah, so unfortunately that's a tricky question. So the process essentially would be, you fill out your application, you're selected as an grantee. Let's say that we say you're fully in the system, you have your contract all set up, and you send us your receipts right away. Probably looking at a 2-week time span to receive that funding. However, that's probably under normal circumstances given everything going on with the state budget and the added responsibilities of the revenue office and things. Probably looking at a month at best. but we'll certainly keep people updated to see if we have any changes in time span. But what our goal, at least from a PDA perspective, is to get this money out the door as quickly as possible to alleviate some of the stresses out there.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Another question is, we've shifted to online ordering and so far have not changed any kind of charged any sort of fulfillment fee. We're in the process of moving to a more robust system that will be more long-term sustainable for us. And we're planning to implement a small fulfillment fee for online orders once we reopen for in-person sales. Can these grant funds be used to offset those fees that will otherwise be passed on to consumers?
Yeah, so we would cover your initial fees. So if you're transferring to that new system, that'll make it more sustainable long-term. Whatever sort of upfront costs you face with that, we certainly could cover that. As far as the fees go, if it's anything between March 1st and November 30th, we can certainly look into that. And I wouldn't discourage you from putting it in your application. And we'll certainly be doing follow-up calls if there's anything we're unsure of or we're unable to do. But I would say err on the side of putting more in the application that you're concerned about than less. So we can certainly take a look at that. Or if you want to talk more, certainly shoot me an email and we'll try and set up a discussion.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And another question, we have one organic produce vendor unable to pay rent because of the reduction in business. Would that be an eligible expense?
That's a good question. That might be one where we should probably talk offline about, just because I'm not 100% sure on that one and need to check with some folks, but certainly happy to have that discussion if you want to send me an email.
Thank you. Next question, are all vendors that accept SNAP at farmers markets eligible or only ones that sell fruit, vegetables, meat, milk, and dairy?
So, certainly we want to see as many people that are taking SNAP as possible. However, given that this is the Fresh Food Financing Initiative, if all you're doing is processed foods, then it's probably not likely that you would be eligible. But if you have other concerns or anything, or if you have products that you're questioning, certainly reach out to me. But our goal here is certainly to target fresh fruits and vegetables, meat, dairy products, things like that.
And I'll just add on there, while individual vendors can apply, the entire market overall can also, or could instead apply, and that may be a good fit if you've got, several vendors who you as a market have had to make and implement changes, then you as the market could apply for this funding, and then you're not necessarily worrying about individual vendors because those, for example, plexiglass shields were used as the market overall, not for specific vendors. Am I correct in that, Mike?
Yeah, that's right. I've had a number of cases with that, and certainly if you're a vendor at a farmer's market and you would like to see more social distancing type things or more infrastructure to protect people and the vendors, it might be a better route for you, since the market owner can apply for more funding, to just have them do it for your operation, even if you're not eligible under this program because of what you're providing. If your farmer's market does, in a holistic view, provide those things, then you can certainly take advantage of that through having your market manager apply.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Another question, our virtual co-op and delivery service was created as a response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The organization that's the fiscal sponsor has been around for 5 years, but only became a 501c3 in March. Would the application need to be under the co-op or organization because the co-op is the fiscal sponsor?
Yeah, I think if everything was up and running by March, I think you could go either way. If there's more to that or more concerns, certainly shoot me an email, but I don't see an issue with either the nonprofit or, the other the co-op doing it. Either way is totally fine.
Okay. Thank you. I'm just looking here. There are a couple of questions that came through the chat as well. So does the FMNP through WIC qualify my store?
Yeah, we'll definitely take that into account. That's definitely something you want to highlight in your narrative. That's totally fine. Yeah.
Okay. Next question. Yeah, you got that one. Is there a site to identify food desert areas?
Yeah, so actually I think Cheryl might have posted it in the chat, and it's also in the application page, and Christina has it right there. So essentially what it is USDA has a map of food access and income, and they combine them together. So all you have to do is hit the little blue link there and a map will pop up, and as long as you are located within any of the different shades colors there, so there's 4 options. If you're in any of those 4, you certainly would qualify. The other option too is if you click on component layer, which is the next sort of section under there, there is a low income, I believe it's in the color blue. And if you're in one of those areas too, that's certainly something, yeah, right there at the top. So if you fall into that, that's definitely something we would consider as well. Again, just please note that in your narrative section, you know, explaining that. But we're trying to make sure that this is as flexible as possible because we do realize that the census tracts, sometimes there's businesses that serve those communities and can even be the only source of fresh produce for those communities. But just the way the census tract lines line up, they might be discredited. So if you are around an area, even if you're not in it yourself with your retail business, that's something we want to hear from you say as well. So,
thank you. I think we've already covered this, but we'll go ahead and ask it again. Can we pay ourselves for the labor of installation of PPE? Can we pay someone else for the installation?
Yeah, so unfortunately you can't pay yourself or your employees for installation, but you certainly can apply the funds towards contractors. So if you had contractors hook up a new, you know, refrigerator or install plexiglass, those are certainly the things that we would cover.
Thank you. Another question, are increased packaging costs covered? And if so, is it just the difference between our regular packaging and the new packaging, or can we submit for the new packaging overall?
Yeah, so if the packaging is aimed at addressing you know, concerns around COVID-19, it certainly would be covered, and it would be the difference between you know, the cost of your previous packaging and sort of that increase due to COVID-19 to get the new packaging. So hopefully that makes sense.
What are some examples of eligible costs under expand access to PA products? Yeah,
so we're thinking about, it kind of is reiterating the things from above, but essentially we tried to keep this not as prescriptive as many of our other programs, just so that if there are unique ideas to bring food to people, that they can be captured under this. We've had a lot of people with mobile markets, and although we can't support, you know, fund vehicles themselves, but if there's, you know, outfitting of a vehicle that is meant to be food distribution and going to different sites, we certainly view that as, you know, an innovative way to have more access because you can go to places and not worry about ADA, you know, issues for people that are trying to get there because you can bring it directly to them. Also thinking about delivery models, you know, there's so many different ways to improve access, and we just didn't want to be prescriptive about that. So if you have any unique ideas you're unsure of, you know, please feel free to float them my way. But yeah, we want to try and capture as many of those innovative and new ways of addressing these challenges as we can.
Thank you. The next one is, assuming we get the award, what kind of documentation will be necessary to show these costs? So what kind of record keeping is necessary?
Sure thing. So the most important thing is making sure that you have receipts from your purchases. So I don't know if we mentioned this from the top, but it is a reimbursement grant. So say you apply for $10,000, we need to see $10,000 in receipts to be sent to us for the reimbursement. Now, as far as the physical process of that, you don't have to worry about any of that up front. So when you do the application, there is a part that kind of looks like where you might be putting in receipts and things like that. You don't actually have to. All it's asking is, how do you know that your request for 10,000 is going to cost you 10,000? And all you have to say there is, I've either gotten bids, I've gotten receipts from the past for those same products, all sorts of different things like that, to sort of just justify where that's coming from. But as far as the initial application, there's no attachments you need to put in. We certainly welcome further information in the narrative, but there's nothing like that. Where that would come into play is after you're selected as a grantee, we would ask that we'll send you a form, you fill it out. It should be something simple like an Excel file where you're just listing, here's this receipt that I have attached also. This is what I purchased on that receipt, and this was the total cost. And that should amount up to your grant ask amount. And from there, we would then send that after you have your contract over to the comptroller's office to get approved, and then you would receive a check for that reimbursement. And
just a follow-up question from that, Mike, how often can they submit reimbursement? So a person earlier was saying, like, I don't have a ton of cash to float on this. So if they do a few $1,000s worth of purchases, can they submit just those few thousand, or is it, kind of a once a month, once a quarter? How often can they submit those receipts for reimbursement?
Yeah, so unfortunately, due to the rules with our CARES funding, it is a one-time submission. So thinking about that, it's something that we've seen in a number of other grant programs where it is a pretty large ask up front. So even if you just want to apply for what you can purchase, that's fine. But if you want to look into other options, I know where I'm from in Pittsburgh, a lot of nonprofits offer to be sort of fiscal sponsors for grants. So if you have any nonprofits in your area, I would certainly look into, if you can't spend $10,000 up front, if that's what you're asking for, see if there's any nonprofits or philanthropic agencies that would be willing to do that. I know, in the city of Pittsburgh, it was for urban agriculture projects where, the urban garden wasn't able to, fork out $15,000 and then wait for reimbursement, whereas that fiscal sponsor could step in and make sure that happened faster. So again, if that's something you're interested in, I certainly would just ask that if you do come up with one of those arrangements, please let us know so that we can fix sort of the financial and contracting aspects on the application. But that is a potential option as well.
Thanks, that's really useful. Question, are transportation costs included? So for example, if we had to add another truck due to increased online orders.
Yeah, so if you're incurring more costs because of transportation or things like that, that would be eligible. So you would just need to sort of justify to us in your narrative saying, it cost us this much previously, and now with COVID, we've had to change systems or do new things, and this was the cost. And again, that would be eligible from March 1st to the end of November.
Thank you. There is a question about, on the main application, there's a question that says, how do you plan to use these funds? And that's a 1,000-character limit. And then in the addenda section, there's a question, please describe how you'll use the funds 8,000-character limit. Can you kind of touch on what the difference is or how folks should handle the duplicated question?
Yeah, sorry about that. My phone just dropped out. Would you mind just repeating the question quickly?
Yeah, no problem. It's kind of the same question twice. And how do you plan to use the funds? One of them is on the main application for 1,000 characters, and one's on the addenda for 8,000 characters.
Yeah, so I think the purpose there is just to make sure we capture all the information. So more so in the budget section and near there, we want to hear more about, even if you want to sort of do a bullet point, this is the item we're purchasing, and this is, what the expected cost would be. And then later on, if you want to explain, the reason we're getting more refrigeration is because we are getting, large amounts of meat that we have to do something with, or, we're able to take on more dairy products because we've seen an increase in purchasing of that, but we just don't have refrigeration. So you can certainly play with that in the way that you want. If you want one of those sections to be more of, a budget that's sort of just listed out versus the other section being more of your true narrative, that's totally fine.
Great, thank you. So I have that slide up that has Mike's email on it. Please feel free to reach out to him. You've got until the deadline of August 14th. Again, we'll send out these slides and the recording. They're usually available within about 2 days, so probably sometime tomorrow or Monday. And we'll also email all the registrants with that information as well. But Mike has been really fantastic in joining us. Cheryl, I really appreciate you joining us as well, giving us that kind of background to this and talking us through both how we can apply and what it's intended to be used for. And I really hope that several PASA folks in the community are able to take advantage of this. One really good kind of wrap up final question here is, when are decisions expected?
Yeah, sure thing. So August 14th being the deadline. Again, like I said, we want to get this moving as quickly as possible. Don't hold me to it, but I would really like to see, everything graded and people notified by the end of August. That's sort of my ambitious goal. That being said, I can't, say that's set in stone. So, the general way it would flow through is by August 14th, we'll be sending this out to the people who will be grading them and sort of evaluating the grant applications. And then hopefully we can send out, an announcement maybe a week or two after that. But we're going to try and turn these around as quickly as possible. And then from there, even if, on the day of the announcement, if you already know, hey, I spent everything that I needed to spend, you can sign the contracting paper, and then as soon as you're ready, you can send the receipts to us, and we'll start getting that through the process.
Thank you. That's helpful. And it looks like we just had one more question come in. We're in production agriculture, and we need a $5,000 piece of farm equipment to increase production. Is that eligible? Yeah, so that might be one I also need to think about a little bit more, and we can talk by email. However, I would say that is a possibility depending on what type of equipment it is. If it's increasing your fresh food going to your retail operation, that's definitely something we can discuss. I just don't have a solid answer for you right now, so I do apologize for that. And so again, the best way for folks to reach out to Mike is to email him, michroth@pa.gov. All of those kind of specific one-off questions would be really good to ask directly and be able to communicate some of the nuance that goes behind those. I appreciate all of you for joining us today. If you have other questions that we didn't get to, or perhaps that you thought of a couple questions as we went through the application, you can always reach out to Mike, but you can also email covid@pasafarming.org. We'll be happy to work through the questions and try and get the answers that you're looking for. I really appreciate everyone joining, and I look forward to seeing you again, and I look forward to seeing a lot of familiar PASA names on the award list when that comes out. Cheryl and Mike, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, and I hope you all have a wonderful day and weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.